Next concept, as I mentioned earlier, from today onwards, we'll be starting something called a C# language. Okay, so as part of this, we'll start understanding the basics of C# language. We'll start with something called as types, variables, constants, and this probably would be the lengthiest module, and it will take at least 6 to 7 hours to understand everything. Okay, that being said, we'll start with something called as types. We'll understand the data types, and after that we'll start understanding what is a variable, what is a constant, and uh, differences between them, what is a enumerator, and after that we'll start understanding decision making logic. We'll start understanding the loops, and we'll start understanding collections and different operations on collections and difference between all the collections existing in C#. And once that is done, we'll move ahead and we'll start understanding something called as delegate, and what is the purpose of using delegate. After that, we'll understand events, and once that is done, we'll understand generics, and after that we'll start something called as anonymous types and link you. So with that, our C# will be completed. So it's the lengthiest module. Please don't miss any session, otherwise we'll get delayed. Fine. Good. 1 second, let me get my headset. Sneha, can you hear me? Are you there?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good. How is your health?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, it's good.
Okay, fine. Fine. In our today's session, we'll start with something called as stack and heap. In our earlier class, while we were discussing our garbage collection, we understood what is a stack and what is a heap, right? So let's try to quickly do a recap of what is stack and what is heap. And stack is a, as we understood earlier, is a last in first out type of memory allocation. And what does that mean? That means that any object which is entered for the last time in your stack should be accessed first. So, and no object could be accessed before the object which is placed after that is being accessed. So that is about your stack. And we understood that anything which is placed on your stack doesn't require a pointer to it. And we understood that heap is a random memory allocation. That being said, each object or each element which is placed in your heap has a pointer attached to it, and this pointer holds the address of your object in the heap, right? Do we remember or not? Good. So what's happening with remaining people? I see response only from Prakriti. What's happening with remaining people? Good. So now let's try to understand what is a value type and what is a reference type. So first let's try to create a table and understand what is a value type. So think that I have a value type called as A. Fine. And its value is 100. Understood? And the address at which it is located is 1000 or 1001. Fine. This is the location of your address address of this particular element inside your stack memory. Fine. Or inside your memory. Making sense? Good. Now I have created a new element called as B, and it is located at 1002nd location. Fine. And after that I have executed a statement called as B equal to A. Understood? Now what will happen? Now B will be still at the 1002nd location, and the value of A would be copied to your value of B. Fine. Making sense? Good. Now so now after that what I am doing, I say A is equal to 200. Now what will happen? A will still be at the same location with value 200. And what is the value of B? B will be 100 and it would be at location 1002, right? So this is how your value types work. Now let's try to understand what happens with a reference type and why it is unique. So I would say element value and that's it. So now I have a new element called as X, which has some value 100 in it. Okay, and its address is 1001. Fine. And by default you should understand that a reference type goes on your heap. A reference type is always saved on your heap. Understood? And where is value type saved? Value type is saved on stack. This is a ground rule. You should understand and remember that. Now what is this? Pointer. Because by default your reference type goes on heap, and anything which is placed on heap should have a pointer tag to it, right? That's what we understood. Yes or no? Good. Now let's create a new reference type called as Y, and we did not assign any value to it. Fine. And what we did, Y equal to X, right? Now what will happen? Y will have P in it. Okay, instead of copying the value called as 100, value of P, which is the pointer, would be copied to your Y, and it still exists in your 1003 location. Making sense? And now what we did, we said Y equal to 200. Fine. Or X equal to 200. Fine. So what will be the value of Y now? y will still have pointer called as p, and it will be still in 1003rd location. Fine. So what does that mean? If you change, if you try to get the value of y, it will get 200 now. Making sense? So every time the reference type is something peculiar, because every time you make some operation or you perform some operation on your reference type, the original value would be changed, which means that here all the references associated with the original value will get affected. Understanding? Vishwa, Krishna, is it making sense? Are you understanding or not? I know Prakriti, Sneha and Sai Krishna are there, but I don't see responses from Vishwa and Krishna. Okay, fine, no problem. So now we understood what is a reference type and we understood what is a value type, right? Now let's try to understand what are different reference types available in your C#. Basically, you should remember that there are very few things which can be called as reference types. So, string, fine. Class interface, delegate, object, string, and enum. So all of them, they are reference types. Understood? What are different value types we have? Anything apart from these is a value type, right? Yes or no? Good. Now, let's try to understand the basic types we have. Fine. Understood? So these are the different types we have. So let's try to understand individually what does each type means. Okay. Before getting here, let's try to understand few things. When we are discussing data types in your C#, you should understand that anything which is called as unsigned means that will hold only positive values. Fine. And anything which is called as signed means that it will hold positive and negative values. Making sense? And let's start with the basic data type called as bool. What is bool or boolean? Have you ever heard of it? No? Good. 1 or 0. Awesome. So bool will hold only two values. Zero or 1, or you can call it false or true, right? Understood? byte. Anything which can hold 8 bits is called as byte. Fine. Char. 1 alpha numeric character. Fine. Which would be A R, B R, C R, 1 R, 2 R, anything, but only one character. Making sense? And after that, you should remember something called as int. Fine. What is int? Int is an integer value, which means it holds numeric values. Fine. Any numeric value which is of 32 bits size. Fine. That can be called as integer, and it can be negative or positive. Fine. For example, there should be a very good table. Let me open it. Let me know when you are able to see the table. Do you see int here? Good. So it holds somewhere between minus this value to plus this value. Making sense? Which means it is a 32-bit value. Fine. And you see that there is something called as uint also, right? What is uint? It's of same 32-bit size again, but it is unsigned, which means it will hold only positive values. Making sense? It will not hold negative values. So it holds somewhere between 0 to this number. Fine. Now there is something else called as short. What is short? What does short hold? Short is 16-bit numeric data type. Fine. That's the reason why it is called as short. And again, you have a unsigned version of it which holds only positive values. Fine. And you see that there is something called as long, which is of 64 bits size. Fine. And again, you have a unsigned version of it. Similarly, you have float, which can hold decimal values also. Fine. And you have double, which is double of this length of float, and it holds decimal values also. Making sense? Understood? Good. And we understood what is character. It holds one single Unicode character. Understood? And finally, object is a generic type. Fine, generic object type. Anything can be converted into a object, and anything can be converted back from object to the original form. Making sense? Then, is object a value type or reference type? Reference type, we have discussed it here, right? Right? Yes or no? Good. So now you should understand two beautiful terms here. Fine. What is boxing and what is unboxing? We understood that object is a we can't call it generic type here because generic has some other meaning in C#. Okay, but you should understand that it's a universal type, which means any any value of certain type can be converted into object, and it can be converted back to the original form from your object. Understood? So the process of converting a element from any type to object type is called as boxing. Understood? And process of converting object type to original type is called as unboxing. Understood? Now you should observe something here. What is a object type, reference type, and all other remaining types, they are value types. So people sometimes say that converting your value type to reference type is called as boxing, and converting the reference type back to your value type is called as unboxing. Making sense? But that is not correct all the time, because string can also be converted into your object type and back to string type again, and string is a reference type, right? Making sense or not, Sai Krishna? That's about your boxing and unboxing. And now sometimes you see that there are two types of string data types seen in your .NET. Have you you don't have experience, right? Okay, good. Let me show you in Visual Studio. Fine. If you see, both the data types can be verbally you can call them as string, but if you see, one is a small string and other one is a capital string, right? So what is the difference between both of them? Are there any differences actually? Both of them, they are taking you to the same class almost, right? Then what is the difference between them? The only difference between small string and capital string is that capital string is a framework specific type or CLR type. Making sense? We understood what is CLR, right? Yes or no? Oh, I remember Sneha and Sai Krishna were not there, only Prakriti was there. So what is CLR? What is CLR specific type? Sometimes we understood that there is something called as CTS or common type system. And for example, think that you have a VB.NET code and you have a C++ code. So both of them, they should interoperate with each other. Both of them, they are under .NET, or both of them, they are .NET framework specific code, but they can't understand each other because for a integer, for representing a numeric value, you have some data type called as integer in your VB.NET, and you have something called as int in your C++. So both of them, they cannot be compatible for interoperability between languages. So what you should do for that purpose, .NET gives you some set of framework specific types, and both of them, they can be interchanged into something called as int32 type, which is a .NET framework specific type, so that they can understand one language to the other language, or code written in one language can communicate with code written in other language. Making sense? Good. So here, same thing happens here. String is a C# specific type and capital string is a framework specific type, and it remains same in all the languages supported by .NET. Understood? Sai Krishna, are you there? Sai Krishna, are you there? Prakriti, are you there? What's happening with you, Sai Krishna? Are you there or not? No problem. That's about your framework specific types. Understood? So did we understand what is stack, what is heap, what is value type, what is reference type, what are different data types in your C#, and what are framework types? Everything made sense or not? Good. Now let's move on to our next topic and try to understand what is it about. Fine. Most of you might have known what is variable. Can you tell me what is a variable? Sneha, I remember you were there in the previous batches class when we were discussing variables, right? What is a variable? Can you tell me? Which holds a value and which is used to save something into the memory and access the value using a name. Fine. Good. So what is a variable? A variable is a name given to your storage area, which means using that name you can save some value into your storage, which is memory, or you can access it or manipulate it. Understood? Good. Sai Krishna is back, luckily. Fine. Here, string str equal to Anil. What are we doing here? Str is a variable. Is it showing that it is a variable? And as we discussed, this is a name used to save this value into your memory, and you can access this value using this name anytime you want. Understood? And you should understand that every variable has a data type associated with it and a value associated with it. Fine. And second property associated with your variable is that once a value is assigned to your variable, then you can change it anytime. Fine. It gets changed. That being said, let's try to understand what is a constant. A constant is similar thing again. Constant is a name given to a storage area in your memory, and it has a value and a data type associated with it, and you can save something into some value into the database using the constant, right? Then what is the difference between your constant and your variable? One second, I'll show you. You will define it using the constant keyword. ABC, and now if you see, when I try changing value of CSTR to XYZ, it will throw a error. Fine. Is it throwing a error? Is it throwing a error? What is the error it's throwing? The left hand side of the assignment must be a variable, property, or indexer, right? So what does that mean? That means once a value is assigned to your constant, then it cannot be changed at any given point of time. Understood? So what is the difference between your variable and a constant? A variable, once assigned a value, it can be changed at any point of time, but if it is a constant, you can't change it. It remains constant. Understood? Good. So that's about your variable, constant, and stack, heap, value type, reference type, data types, and framework specific type. Does it make sense? Any questions? Anyone? Any questions? No. Then we are good. So we can leave for today. Fine. So again, just to mention, I have some meeting at 7 p.m. today. That's the reason why we started it at 6, but from tomorrow again it will be at 7 until and unless I inform you. Making sense? Good. Okay. Thanks so much for joining. Let's meet tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you. Good night.